On this episode of Business Earth, GreenTV's Chris Horner interviews Mark Newton, Head of Sustainability for Samsung North America.
We have a very aggressive commitment to source all of our operations renewably by 2050. Here in the United States alone, we're recycling over 100 million pounds of electronics every single year on average. And that's only about 10% of what we do globally. One of the really exciting things that we're doing is partnering with issue advocates and other business partners, like the one we just did recently with Patagonia, you might have heard about, where we're focusing on reducing microplastics. I was really struck a couple years ago when I met a young man named A.Y. Young, and he's a social influencer, and he says, use your passion to take an action. And I'm really inspired by that.
And now your host, Chris Horner.
Hello, and welcome to Business Earth on GreenTV.com. I'm your host, Chris Horner, and our guest today is Mark Newton, Head of Sustainability for Samsung North America. Thanks so much for being with us, Mark.
Hi, Chris. It's my pleasure.
Samsung products are pretty much everywhere: cell phones, TVs, computers, appliances, as well as many of the chips inside of them. Samsung is one of the Earth's largest electronics corporations and the largest smartphone manufacturer. 300,000 employees worldwide and annual revenues of $250 billion. As such, Samsung, like its competitors, has a huge responsibility via its products, manufacturing processes, and capital investments to lead modern civilization ASAP toward a more circular economy and ever-increasing sustainability. With increasingly dire environmental news we see everywhere, setting this example is one of the most important ways big business can significantly help civilization reach a safer, healthier, and survivable future. But will it? We're here today to find out some of how Samsung is addressing this enormous challenge and responsibility. So let's begin with you, Mark. Can you tell us how you arrived here in your career and about your mission, both personal and at Samsung? What motivates and energizes you about your job?
Well, thanks for the question, and thanks for the opportunity to chat with you, Chris. Sustainability has been a opportunity for me. The entire experience working through large companies and focusing on ESG, because my technical background, my background, I have a PhD in chemistry, and I came at this really from a material scientist standpoint. It's such an opportunity for learning. In order to be successful, you really have to understand all parts of the business. You have to understand some very nuanced issues. You have to be willing to open up to external issue advocates, as well as industry partners. And for me, the opportunity to collaborate across all different parts of our business and across so many different topics, it's just been a fantastic experience throughout my career. You know, back 20 years ago or so, the biggest issues were, what sort of substances are in products, understanding what's in the products, working with the supply chain to understand what sort of materials we're designing, becoming more familiar with the design process itself, was really what got me hooked. And then as my career progressed, it became focused additionally on things like the energy efficiency of the products, the operational aspects around the waste, circularity, and then, besides recycling and all these other sorts of things that popped up, now on my plate were, global issues around human rights and ethical sourcing.
We're going to get to all of that. Let me ask you a question that I want to ask you, because you mentioned the energy component, and I saw on your website. I mean, the company's sustainability efforts are very serious on several fronts, and something that particularly struck me not sure if I got it right, when I read that Samsung energy use for all its operations has been 100% from renewable sources since 2019. How did Samsung actually achieve this remarkable result, and how much has it brought down the company's total carbon footprint?
So we have a very aggressive commitment to source all of our operations renewably by 2050. Our business is broken up into two big parts. One of them is our sort of semiconductor and memory business, and the other is everything else. And as you know about Samsung, on the everything else side, we're making all kinds of consumer electronics, home appliances, mobile products, and networking products. And so that part of our business has an even more aggressive goal in terms of a net zero, as well as our renewable energy aspiration. So for that part of our business, we're seeking to be net zero by 2030. And part of that is a commitment to source renewably by 2030 also. Our semiconductor business is much more challenging, more energy intense, and we have a goal which is still aggressive to be net zero and 100% renewable by 2050.
So let me it's incredibly impressive for a company the size of Samsung, what you guys are doing. Let me ask you a little bit about Samsung's supply chain. How far upstream does the company's sustainability efforts go? And how thoroughly does Samsung research its material sources, its toxicity footprint, as well as its carbon footprint? Who its subcontractors employ and under what conditions? Does Samsung actively help its subcontractors to become more sustainable, including encouraging fair treatment of their employees?
So one of the things people don't really know about Samsung is we are probably the most vertically integrated company that most people do business with on the consumer electronics side. Almost everyone else in our sector outsources all their manufacturing or most of it. Typically, 80% of a company's scope 1, 2, and 3 is going to be the scope 3. And about 80% of that is going to be supply chain in our sector. For Samsung, it's very different. For Samsung, only about 11% of our total greenhouse gas emissions is supply chain oriented. We're extremely vertically integrated, and we own and operate almost all of our manufacturing. And then of our scope 3, about 80% of that is product use focused. And so that's one of the reasons why we have such a huge focus on improving the efficiency of our products, because it's the biggest way to leverage our largest impact, which is really the scope 3 associated with product use. So supplier is important, right? But it's equally important for us to manage our own internal operations ethically as well. So we really take a consistent approach in terms of the way we're managing our supply chain as the way we're managing our own internal operations. We've been involved in the CDP supplier initiative, the Carbon Disclosure Project supplier initiative for many years, encouraging our supply chain to measure their greenhouse gas emissions and also report and set goals on those. From a human rights and labor standpoint, we are a signatory of the UN Global Compact. We follow very closely the Responsible Business Alliance Code of Conduct, and we implement that both in terms of our direct managed operations, as well as set expectations for our suppliers to do that with their suppliers. And this goes beyond just manufacturing. It also includes ethical sourcing of minerals and other sorts of raw materials. And so as a result of our efforts, we're ranked second amongst the ICT companies for human rights by the World Benchmark Alliance, and 7th for digital inclusion.
I want to turn to the issue of circularity. It's a term we hear a lot these days, and the phenomenon of creating a corporate and larger planetary economy that is entirely renewable and sustainable, ideally wasting nothing, reusing everything, while minimizing toxicity and carbon footprints. So how achievable is this for companies the size of Samsung? And do you think it's something that's achievable on a planetary scale?
Well, it's essential. We have to figure this out. Okay, we're going to run out of raw materials, and if we don't get smart about mining waste, we're not going to be able to meet the product demand for our roadmap. And so, companies are in our sector, especially those that are very dependent on metals, are taking this extremely seriously, as are we. And the other thing is really to help our customers return products and get materials back into the cycle, and that has to do with education as well as making repair and recycling as easy as product purchase. And we operate one of the largest recycling infrastructures in the world for an electronics company. Here in the United States alone, we're recycling over 100 million pounds of electronics every single year on average. And that's only about 10% of what we do globally. And we're also have recently made some commitments to expand the base at which we are offering free recycling around the world. Right now, I think we're in about 55 countries, which were our primary business countries, and we're expanding to 180 by 2030, which is everywhere where we do business. The main thing is to get these materials back into commerce. And with an operation our size, even if we can't get all that material back into our own products directly from our collection sites, we certainly have a goal to get this material that we are collecting and get it into commerce, get it back into other sectors. And this is really what's the important part, as well as sourcing raw materials that are recovered from other sectors back into our products. So it's important to think about a circular economy in a much broader sense than closed loop recycling, which is the way a lot of companies and a lot of laypersons really think about the topic.
Much has been reported about different kinds of corporate greenwashing and ESG claims that stretch the truth. Given Samsung's size and global reach, how does Samsung address the fact that, like most companies, while growing the bottom line and increasing consumption would seem critical for its financial success, there is something about that that doesn't square with encouraging greater sustainability or less consumerism? Is there an inherent conflict between good corporate intentions and bottom line economic reality?
Well, I don't think so. I don't look at it that way. I really think that our corporate intention is to help our customers thrive. And so, when we approach this really by under promising and over delivering. We're an innovation engine, and we're focused on focusing on the most important aspects of our product, which is really around energy efficiency and the ability to help our customers be more productive and more efficient in the way that they operate. And so, and what we are really looking to do is to create net positive value with our products. Now, of course, it takes energy and it takes resources to make those products. And that's the reason why our circularity strategy is so robust, driving efficiencies in the way that we're operating, focusing on things like zero waste to landfill in all of our operations, driving down our energy intensity, shifting over to renewable energy, all these things to try to have as light a footprint on the planet as possible while still delivering to the customer products that they need and demand, and ultimately help them be more productive. So I think if every company were to do that, right, we'd be in a pretty good place. But I agree, this idea, this linear, old school approach of digging materials out of the ground, creating products with them, sending them over to the wall to customers, and then throwing them away at the end of life, that's absolutely not the way to go forward. And we get that. So anything we can do to try to help break that chain, I think, is really important.
Because of the way certain businesses have conducted themselves, many question whether and how much to trust large corporations. the balance between the public good versus the shareholder good. How does Samsung come down on achieving this balance? Can we as a society trust very large corporations and even conventional capitalism itself? Does the company think that unbridled extractive capitalism must evolve to better serve the long-term well-being of the planet and the life economy?
Well, look, yeah, consistent with what I've been saying, and really aligned with my philosophy as a sustainability leader, I look at this as an opportunity for us to make much better business decisions. If we are bringing in these externalities, right, which are impacts associated with your business, which aren't necessarily monetized, and we can think about those in terms of how they land on the balance sheet, and put this information in front of us, we're going to be making better decisions. And I think that's really the core way that companies should be thinking about this, not so much in the more traditional sustainability sense of, environmental responsibility and social responsibility. Those are important, right? But more broadly, in terms of these externalities and how you run your business from a resilience standpoint, and including the real cost. And I think that's what helps companies really navigate this. And so I look at my role really as much as a futurist, as an ESG professional, where we're bringing in this information so that the senior team can make better decisions. And if we can stay in business longer and continue to add value to our shareholders and our customers, that's another definition of sustainability, right? So I think that that's really the core focus, and to be realistic about what the true costs are in terms of your social and environmental impacts.
How are you doing in the fight to save the planet? What are your biggest concerns going forward on that subject? And what do you tell younger generations and closer to home? I don't know if you have kids, but if you do, what do you tell them? And in your opinion, will they and we all make it?
Yeah, I love that question. And it doesn't just come from my kids. It comes from folks that are looking to make a difference in their world, and join companies or nonprofits in order to do that. And I interact with folks at business schools and colleges, and in my personal life. And I'm blessed to have as many grandchildren as I have children now. And it looks like that ratio is going to be continuing to shift in favor of the grandchildren. And of course, I think, it really grounds. I was really struck a couple of years ago when I met a young man named A.Y. Young, and he's a social influencer and a performer who powers all of his concerts with renewable energy, and he's part of our Generation 17 young ambassadors, where we've got folks that are passionate about these issues from all over the world. He says, use your passion to take an action. And I'm really inspired by that. And that's a message that I like to tell folks that are looking to get it into this business and are trying to make a difference. The other is be solid about your education and your focus on a technical area, whether it's in business or engineering or marketing, what have you. If you're going to come into a company to affect change, get your sergeant stripes in a really core area, and then use your passion and your alignment in order to make change on the sustainability front, and the opportunity for success is much greater that way.
Yeah, you're a fortunate man. I mean, aside from all your kids and grandkids, to have found a place where you can really apply something which is clearly a passion for you, and to find a company that seems to be very interested in this line of thinking about the future. What excites you most about the future, and where do you see the most room for improvement?
I'm very optimistic about the future. I mean, let's just start with one thing. Look at the transition that's happening right now with renewables. It's just it's exploding, and it's shifting from needing subsidies in order for this business to grow to having market demand, which is making it grow. And so that's a really exciting thing. And then we see this shift to EVs, for instance, electric vehicles. And there's going to be a future not that far where everybody's got electric vehicles in their home. And so what does that look like? Well, think about that as a very large storage battery attached to every single house, right? And so now, what does that do with energy security and resilience? Well, the idea that when we're stressing the grid that there are brownouts and blackouts probably goes away when we start thinking about having the opportunity to have distributed power and changing the way that we distribute that power from a push system more into a distributed system. So for me, that's a really exciting movement. Also, the way that diversity and equity is becoming much more part of our consciousness in terms of our social fabric and acceptance in the workplace. I think that brings nothing but fresh ideas and resilience to our operations. That, to me, is very exciting. And the way that we're treating our employees as well as our supply partners consistently is helping to accelerate that. And then the next is just, Gen Z, right? It's just always exciting to see the next generation. They have very little spending power right now, but they have a lot of influence, and they're going to have more spending power than anybody pretty soon. And so for me, that's an opportunity for education. Really, it's about helping them to understand where the opportunities are, where the challenges are, and inspiring them to become aware, become good consumers, and understanding the companies they're doing business with, their opportunity in society to make a difference.
Yeah, that educational component, that's basically the reason for GreenTV.com is there's quite a bit of corporate communications, but there isn't actually in the big media anyway. The kinds of things that we've been talking about are not things that are yet part of the mainstream, and just that the communications and the accessibility of a larger public to the kinds of things that you've been talking about is we at Green TV believe that that's a very important component of helping this transition happen. So we're coming to the end of our time. I wanted to ask you, a good place to end is there anything that that I didn't ask you that you'd like to speak about?
One of the really exciting things that we're doing is partnering with issue advocates and other business partners, thinking about NGOs, for instance, as resources, not adversaries. They have a very important perspective and deep expertise in areas that we need to learn and grow in. And so that's an important way to consider stakeholders like that, and our customers being extremely focused on what their demand is, what their needs are, and understanding that and partnering with them. And then unexpected partnerships, like the one we just did recently with Patagonia, you might have heard about, where we're focusing on reducing microplastics, which are a big issue in the ocean in terms of pollution. And who would have thought of putting an apparel company together with a tech company like Samsung to come up with a washer that can reduce the amount of microplastics that are coming out? And so that partnership's only grown. That's
interesting. I actually hadn't heard of that, but Patagonia, I've had some dealings with them. They're just down the way. I'm in Santa Barbara, and they're headquartered in Ventura, and which is 20 minutes away. And amazing company, and it's wonderful to hear that you're partnering with them on this issue, which is just a huge issue. And as you said, is it specifically, are you talking about it something like a new filtration system in your appliances that allows you to?
Actually, it's a multi-phased approach. So kind of the most intuitive would be, let's put a filter on the washer, right? And that does help, but there are usability issues with filters. You gotta change, the filters. What are you going to do with all that stuff you just filtered? Where does that go, right? So that's not really a solution. But it's part of a solution. It can help and enhance a solution. We focused on the operation of the washer itself, looking at the reason why fabrics are shedding these microparticles, and these fibers, how big are they? What can we do to trap them after they're out? Well, that's the filter approach. But how do we keep it from, products from shedding these to begin with? And so it's around, cycles that are very effective using cold water, very effective in getting detergent into the fabric using, like micro bubble techniques that can move the detergent into the fabric, and do extremely good cleaning on a very gentle cycle. And so those are the kinds of things that we start to think about. But frankly, without a thought partner like Patagonia to identify the problem and to come at it, also bringing in resources from the nonprofit side, folks that are really dealing with this on the water stewardship end of it as well, I think is really makes for a robust partnership, and it fits into a much larger strategy that we have. We didn't talk about it because we didn't have time, but our semiconductor business uses a lot of water, and so you would think, like, why would Samsung care about water pollution? Well, we use a lot of water in our operations, and so water stewardship is a really important part of our strategy. In fact, we have an extremely aggressive goal to freeze the amount of water withdrawal that we're doing globally to 2021 levels by 2030. And so it's very aggressive. If you think about how the semiconductor industry is exploding, freezing, one of the most important inputs to that process is a very dramatic challenge, and we're committed to that.
I just want to thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us today, Mark. And thanks to all of you tuning in. And let's take good care, do your part, and we'll see you next time on Business Earth.